Hey, welcome to Watch Your Point Overtime, where we expound and extend on topics that we think are important and interesting. All right, you guys, we were talking about DEI, and you know, I'm going to argue, or at least make the point on Texas the issue is tonight, that you know, here's the issue, and Mark has kind of touched on it. When is the playing field level, and who decides that? And we'll just assume it's not level right now, but who makes that call? The people who are getting the uplifting services? Why would I ever give those up if it gives any type of advantage? And if you continue them, does it become, and I use that term, reparation? And who makes those calls? I don't know. Look, it's a complicated deal, but they're spending lots of money. Clearly, this is an issue that it hits home for the base in the Republican Party. It's what it's all about. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it in this next legislature. With that, any thoughts, Chau?
Well, okay, so you and I worked, you're still in media, but
Yeah.
remember, media is a representation of your community. And so
Right.
it does not get lost on me as a young reporter in her early 20s, getting on the air in this city, that I represented a certain population of this community.
Yeah.
It really is similar to
And
what
still do.
and still do, right? Look at your, look at your station, look at the people who are on the air these days. It's representative of your community. And if you don't have those voices at the table, then it's not representative of the university culture, of what's going on, on campus. Abolishing DEI is a terrible idea. For political, Gary's giving me a look, but for political purposes, it's a terrible idea. We have to have representation. That said, this is the statistic I just love to hold on to. By 2050, the majority of Americans will be biracial, right? So we won't have multiracial, right? So my children, other children, and
children.
Right. And so we won't have, maybe, the hope is we won't have a lot of these racial issues, because we're going to look like a hybrid mishmash of Americans by, in the next few decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Bill.
Have you ever seen the movie Bullworth?
Yes.
There's a segment in there about that. I can't. It's pretty, racy, so I can't repeat it. Go look at it.
That's funny. It's a funny movie.
So look, first of all, I think Chau's absolutely right. This is something to go away. I went to my grandson's robotic tournament the other day, or better yet, I went to my 12-year-old's Little League baseball game yesterday. The umpires were African American. My son's team were white, Hispanic, Indian, African American. Nobody cared about any of that. No. Everybody cared about, were they getting hits? Were they getting outs? After the game was over, everybody was hugging and shaking hands. The two umpires who were both African American and the two coaches who were both white were out there shaking hands and talking to each other and talking about getting together sometime. Look, a lot of this exists in this media partisan space in the world, Mm-hmm. And when you get out there in the real world, I just don't find there's nearly as much animus as I hear people talk about. Now, I do think there's a real political consequence from DEI. And it is exactly answers the reason of Marcus about why in the world would half the country vote for somebody like Donald Trump that doesn't represent any of most of our values. And the reason is it's a pushback against what people feel like is unfair treatment. There's a great book, by the way, called The White Working Class by a lady named Williams is her last name, or the first now, who wrote, she's a very progressive Democrat, and she wrote this in 2017 to explain the Democratic Party why they lost the election to Trump. And this is exactly what she addresses, is there is this feeling among the white working class that they're not being treated fairly anymore. Now, historically, you can say that's really not very, that's pretty rich to say that, but they don't live in history, they live in today. And I'm telling you, it's having a real political consequence. And when you've got, 80, 90, 98% of professors, are Democrats, when you've got 90+% of the media or Democrats. I mean, you know, look, there's a real argument that it's not representative of the American people.
Yeah, to what you said about your grandson's game. I mean, my daughter's little high school in Westbury Christian, probably about a third African American, a third Anglo, and a third Asian and Hispanic. It was like a melting pot. And it was the most successful academic and athletic and social community. I'm going to leave here and go to St. Thomas More Church, and it looks like the United Nations in there. I mean, you know, it's everybody. So, I don't know. Look, but I get it. It is not an even playing field for a lot of kids. It is not an even playing field. I had some advantages that folks who don't look like me didn't have. And I came from my dad was a public school educator. My mom was a secretary. We still had some advantages. And I get it. People, we want to have a level playing field, but you know, gets back to my fundamental question is, when is it level and who makes that call?
Yeah, and the biggest problem with that is when you mentioned who are we going to take care of now, and who are we going to discriminate against now because of past things that happened that weren't right. So the people that are coming up now that happen to be white could come from a working class background, may then under DEI get treated worse because we're trying to make up for something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. So how is that fair? And so what's going on? The Democrats have lost the white working class. They're gone. They're in the process of losing the Hispanic working class because they're only representing, as Bill aptly describes, they're so far to the left, they're losing people. Now the Republicans, we got our own problems. I understand. The only thing that's good about the Republican Party primarily is we're fighting the Democrats. For the Democrats, if they get smart, the only good thing for them is that they're fighting the Republicans if people don't like. But it is a difficult and terrible situation, and we need to have color blindness, and then we need to make sure, what I call, is we give affirmative opportunity to historically underrepresented groups. Okay, UT has been struggling for years, as is A&M, to get more and more African American students, and they made progress. But you know, when we created these and worked with them to create rooms back in the early 70s, I didn't think that we'd be in 2020 and Texas is at what, 10% African American. I'm stunned that it's still that low. But then I'm told the students, in order to get into UT, you got to be way up there, and A&M, and the students they want to recruit can go anywhere in the country. Okay, and then oftentimes they're going to get offered a lot of money to go to those schools, and so they have trouble getting them because they're competing. It's like going after great athletes.
One of the lines that'll resonate with me is when Marcus said, you know, I'm just tired of asking white people for, you know, to be fair. Or I don't know, it's not what you said, but it was something to that extent.
Yeah, I'm not a beggar, right?
Yeah, I get it.
I have no interest in saying, please let me into your University of Texas. I could give a damn less. I'd rather go to Texas Southern. I'd rather go to Howard. I'd rather go to FAMU. I'd rather not go to those institutions. And I'd rather that black people not continue to ask white people to give them anything. The only thing that I want from them is the things that you owe. Now, that's a different conversation.
I understand.
Right? And, you know, I know that the baseball game, Bill, seemed like a great moment. And I know that, you know, the event you went to. But, guys, let's be honest. That for every event that you went to that felt like a kumbaya moment, there was some other hostile racial event going on somewhere else.
I
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't think that I don't think there's as many hostile events go on as events where people get along.
And look, and this notion that because, you know, that we went and everybody was there and it was a mixed bag. Yeah, that's fine and dandy, but it doesn't mean that the racial undertone that occurs.
Then how do we fix it, Marcus? How do we fix it?
I don't know if this is fixable.
No,
it's not fixable.
I don't know that it's fixable.
Fixed by exactly what Chau said, which is this younger generation. Yeah. So the same grandson had his birthday party. There were 8 young men there. There were 2. This is his buddies out of all his classmates, and these are his friends that he picked to go to his birthday party. 2 African American, 2 Indian kids, a Hispanic, and then a couple of white kids. That was those are his buddies who he hangs out with.
Right.
And if you went to him and said something negative about any of those people because of the color of their skin, he would think you were insane.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. And throughout the history of America, you could find the little white kid who had the black friend and believed that his black friend was a good person until his racist grandpa influenced him, until the racist society influenced him. So that little kid that you're talking about now will grow up in this world where the student protests on yesterday that was supposed to be about Israel and Palestine, except the white kids decided to make monkey faces and noises at the black girl. Monkey faces and noises. This wasn't 20, 30 years ago, Gary. This was yesterday.
The reason that's on the news is because that is so out of bounds and so abnormal. If that had happened at the baseball game, that person would have been thrown out by the entire crowd. Look, the difference.
We're forgetting we have a race-baiting presidential candidate that is supported by a lot of people, guys. He hit Donald Trump's base. Let's not miss out on the fact that the core of his group is coming as a result of the racial things that he's throwing out. You might not think so.
I don't think that's
oh, okay, my bad. I guess we forgot that the Proud Boys led the
You're talking about a huge portion of the Republican voting electorate, and that's not it.
You want to see the future?
They're vocal.
I hear you loud and clear. You cannot believe it if you want to, but
if you want to see the future, just in this city, go walk through the elementary schools.
Right.
Like not the private schools, the public schools. Go walk through those classrooms, and what you will see is the future, which is so multi-racial. The diversity in those classes, those kids sitting there learning with their friends. Well, that's the future. That's what you have to focus on, is not what I don't have up here, but these kids down here, which are going to be living in our city, running our city, that are growing up together, that are understanding each other, that aren't being so mean to each other because that's my friend.
Yeah.
Well, you have to allow things to change and not hold on to the past.
So
but you got to heal the trauma.
Listen to what you said. You said if you go to the public schools, not the private schools, right? Go to the public schools, not the private schools. And at the private schools, those will be the ones that will be running the city. Yeah, those will be the ones that will be running the government.
My grandson goes.
I mean, just look at the history.
My grandson goes to a private school, and it is every bit as diverse as the public schools are.
Yeah.
Oh no. I was just referring to our
I
state.
just use that because
hold on, one at a time.
Mark, I think what you're missing is generationally this is changing.
Oh,
it's not
absolutely.
changing quickly. But if you go back, so I'm 72. You go back to when I went to high school, we were 90+% white. You know, I didn't have any black friends. I mean, there were a couple of black kids in school that I knew.
I don't think I'm missing the idea that generationally it may be changing. I thought the conversation was about today.
It is changing.
It may be changing in the future.
No,
you're right, Sue. That may
now.
be that may be true.
That's
but we're talking
true.
about we're talking about today.
No,
Well, what I hear Marcus saying is we have
living
not
in the
healed the trauma of this country.
Well,
we
have
are
Hold
not
on,
healed it.
let Chau talk. Wait a second.
We have not healed the trauma, and we do have
You
to
won't be
address
able
it.
to.
And at the intersection of race and poverty, that's how you heal this country.
Well-
you have to address. You can't address one without the other.
My
You've
comment
got
would
to
be,
better
Marcus,
communities.
we
There
are-
has to be better.
Hold on. We can't have an
let's
effective
look at
conversation
this.
if everybody's talking at the same time.
Crime,
Let's
violence.
look at this, right? Because this conversation was about DEI and about the unlevel playing field.
Yeah.
Let's use a great indicator. The wealth disparity in this nation is horrific. It is an indicator of how unlevel the playing field. Nobody can deny that. The worth of white families compared to black families is tragic. The playing field is not level.
What is it to Hispanic families? What is it to Asian families?
Well, Asians,
I don't know because I'm talking about.
But that's important.
It's
so
true
you
for the
should have
Asians.
that. You should have the answer if it's important to you.
I'm not the one.
I'm just talking about the wealth disparity being an indicator of how unlevel the playing field.
Here's what you need to look at. If you look at poverty rates in the country, the number one group in poverty are white people. Okay, White people.
That's because of the population.
Population.
Well, okay,
You're-
but that's
per
not-
capita, that's
Can I
not
finish,
true.
or you're going to keep interrupting me?
I don't know. It depends.
Come on, we have to have.
Go ahead.
Let's have
Gary.
a civil.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's white people, okay? So you are living in the past. We've been transitioning for issues we had for a long time in this country over the last few decades, and we have made progress. Have we made all the progress we should make? No, we still have more progress to go. But here's where I tell you where I think things are changed. Go to the courthouse. Come spend the day with me in the courthouse. You'll see who I represent. You will see who our judges are. They're, for the most part, African American. A lot of African American women. A lot of them are doing a terrific job. They got elected by a mixed race electorate. That's who voted for them, okay? So every day, and in fact, you look at the DA's office, lots of black prosecutors. And so my world, the world I live in.
You're completely misunderstanding what I'm saying.
You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. In the world I live in, I've seen dramatic changes over my career in what the courthouses look like and who's there and who's not. So I see progress every day. That's what I'm telling you.
Gary,
you may not see it as progress. I do.
So what you're saying, and let me get this right. Let me get this right.
But going 2 miles an hour in a car.
It ain't 2 miles an hour.
Going 5 miles an hour.
You don't know what you're talking about.
No, you can't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. I know exactly what I'm. And see,
that
right there, that's a perfect example.
No.
Your privilege just stood up and said you don't know what you're talking about.
You don't know what you're talking about in the courthouse.
How on earth are you going to tell me about my experience and not?
That's
No, I never denied the courthouse. Not one single time did I deny the courthouse.
Hold on, this is not going to work.
Not one single time. But you just decided to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about.
In the courthouse.
I never denied the
You
courthouse.
said that.
I said what? What did I say?
did.
What did I say?
You did, Marcus.
When did what? Tell me what I said.
Greg, you got to step
Tell
in
me
here.
what I
Hold
said.
it, guys.
Hey,
Hold
guys,
it.
come on.
No. You said I said it. Tell me
You
what I
implied
said.
that I don't know what I'm talking
No.
Nobody cares what y'all-
You said
nobody
you
cares
don't
what
know
y'all
what you're
argue
talking
about.
about. What exactly were you referring to?
Move along.
We cannot take things
You know?
personally in these discussions. You're taking it personally.
Because
Well,
he
because he
said
said
you
it
don't
is
know what
what
you're
you're
and then
talking
and then
It's part of- and you're telling him he doesn't understand.
No. And then you told me I can't take it personally. And when he was the one that told me that I don't know what I'm talking about.
And the courthouse.
And then but who did you address? You didn't address Gary. You addressed Marcus.
You didn't know what you're talking
You did,
about.
and he says it again.
Yeah,
what
courthouse.
exactly did I say?
The courthouse.
I never said anything
You
about the courthouse.
implied that I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I didn't.
He
I
didn't imply
did
he
not
never
say
said
that.
that.
All right.
I didn't say that.
Are we
Check the
done?
tape.
I'm ready to leave.
I never said that.
Hold on for a second.
You said I was living in the past. I'm living in the present.
This is
You said that there's progress. I said it's slow progress. You said I don't know what I'm talking about. I know the life. I know the life that I live. I know my real perception. I know my real existence, and you can't tell me differently.
Well, what I hear from you also is, and see from your life experience, is that you are a raging success and a multimillionaire on the landscape that you were given in life.
Okay,
And yet you feel you still have grievances, significant
without a doubt.
grievances.
Without
And
a doubt.
so I'm going to ask you this question. You talked about the economic disparity. If we could write a check to every African American family you feel has been shortchanged, do you think that would solve the problem?
Oh, it would. I don't know if it'll solve the problem, but it would at least make an effort to right the wrong.
Agreed. It's atonement. It really is. I mean,
You're
we
right.
did it. By the way, we did it during COVID. We gave people handouts.
Which hasn't happened
No.
in this nation.
So what happens if it doesn't solve the problems?
No. It's not about solving the problems. It's a step towards healing the trauma.
But here,
It really is, and because I work in trauma, and
there's
people
also,
want accountability.
Jewish Americans were substantially discriminated against from the beginning of time, but in our country for 100 years. I mean, it's not as if Irish Americans were discriminated against.
The history
Asian, I mean, it goes on and on. Where do we stop?
Slavery in this country is still very young and unique.
I love that, Greg.
Unique.
I love the way you
can't
lumped
believe-
all of that into the atrociousness of slavery in this nation. I love the way you lumped all of that into Jim Crow that existed in this nation. We just talked about Martin Luther King earlier. I love the way you lumped all of that into the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where black people were beaten brutally for wanting to practice democracy.
Hold on.
I love the way you lumped all of that together.
So we're going to go to break here. Okay, I can keep talking. What I'm saying is that English people persecuted Irish people. Before that, French people persecuted English people. And before that, the Romans took them all over. And before that, people have been enslaved
Greg, we're talking
and treated
about
poorly.
right here in the United States of
So
America.
we're only going to we're not going to look at the big picture.
No, because that's how you why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Because it's the history of humankind.
No.
We're talking, and we can have that conversation at a later date and another discussion. Right now, we're talking about what happened between the Atlantic and the Pacific. We're talking about what happened in this nation, and we're talking about today what the result is.
And so,
Greg, I've heard this. I've heard your argument a lot. The history of slavery in this country is unique. It's different than talking about the Irish and the Catholics and the Vietnam. This is about slavery, and this is about the color of his skin.
And it's
So that has nothing to do with hold on for a second. Hold on for just a second.
Clarify, it's not about slavery.
You've been clarifying the whole time.
It's not about slavery.
That has nothing to do with the Japanese genocide against Chinese and others in that era. It's different.
It is different. The history of slavery here goes back a few hundred years.
Humans mistreating other humans.
No, but that's a power dynamic, and you're right. There's a lot of humanity in this country, but the history of blacks and slavery in this country is unique and different and generational, and you're looking at police brutality and oppression. I just think that you can't clump and put all these issues of oppression into one pot. You just can't. It's unique and it's different.
Yeah, and what I was clarifying was this is not simply about slavery. Because every time we talk about reparations, we always want to just take it back to slavery. No, it's not just simply about slavery. This is about what happened to my ancestors, my people whose knee I sat upon. I sat upon my great grandfather's knee, who was denied all of the veteran rights when he came back from fighting the war. I sat upon my great grandmother's knee, who was denied the right to vote but had to pay taxes. That's not that. So this isn't just about the shackles. We're talking about the years of Jim Crow that existed that did terrible harm.
I'm not saying
and disrepair to
that resentment is not justified. I'm just saying what's the path forward. And what on the table we have now, DEI programs and the suggestion, we've had discussions about reparation, writing a check as Chau calls it, atonement. Is that going to make the situation better?
It's not a question of whether they make it better or not, Greg. It's a question of what needs to be done. If you owe me money, you owe me money. It doesn't mean that it's going to make. If you owe me money, pay me my money. It doesn't mean that my financial situation is going to be different. You still owe me the money. It's that simple. And America was built on free labor. Free labor became the wealthiest nation in the world because of the free labor.
There's no end game in this.
No. Yeah.
Well,
there is. Yeah.
That's why there's no end game. There really isn't.
look,
at all.
Reparations are never going to happen. It's not politically viable. It's not going to happen.
I don't care if it's politically viable.
And the more you talk about it, the more resentment it causes. And so I think it actually hurts the cause at the end of the day. I fully appreciate that the African American experience in the United States is different than other minorities because of the slavery issue. It's a different thing.
And Jim Crow.
However, well, yeah, Jim Crow was just a extension of slavery. Really.
Like it's
It is different.
generationally.
I will say this, slavery in the United States is not unique in the world history by any stretch of the imagination. It's actually a tiny fraction of the slavery that's gone on in the world. In fact, North American slavery was only about 20% of the slavery in the New World. There are many more slaves in the West Indies and in South America than there were in the United States. But I understand that it's a different experience. The Irish were treated terrible by the English. In fact, Frederick Douglass, when he went to visit Ireland, talked about, he said, these people are worse off than African Americans are living in America. So then you get into the whole thing about, well, what's all this relative, how do we give these people 100,000, these people 20,000? How do you? And the problem is, all you end up doing is just stoking resentment and the divisions that already exist. If you want to do something about, this issue, the principal reason African Americans have a lower net worth today is because they don't own their homes.
Hold that thought, Bill. We got to go to break.
Right.
Pick it up in a second.
And why is that?
I'll tell you after the break.
Well, part of it comes from the fact
hey, we've had so much intensity, I forgot the time. Thanks for joining us. Watch Your Point Overtime is over.
Oh, we're taking a break, a permanent break.
They're going to